The Learned Youth Program really was set up out of a personal necessity of mine. So in terms of its purpose, I realized at a particular point when my son was about 16 doing his GCSEs, and I thought his Islamic education, although I'd sent him to good madrasas, good maktabs, I felt it was inadequate. I felt that there was a lot, even when it comes to the basics of his ibadah, his salah, etc. I thought that the fiqh needed to be checked properly. I checked a couple of times and I thought that it wasn't quite polished. His wudu and his salah and things like that weren't polished. Then I thought to myself, he's about to do his GCSEs, about to go to sixth form. He's exposed to the usual stuff, right? He has, by then he's 16. I'd given him a smartphone around 16, so there was all this exposure online. He obviously, like all young people, they're exposed to movies and all of that stuff. And I thought to myself, he's being exposed, not just him, but my nephews and nieces as well. They're all being exposed to so many different ideas and worldviews, ideologies, and so on. And a big chunk of them are a direct threat to their iman. And I didn't feel I'd done enough in terms of conversations with them that would make them resilient to these issues in terms of their iman. And I was pretty confident that their maktab education hadn't addressed this. It doesn't matter how good it is, I'm pretty sure hardly any maktabs deal with the kind of issues that make young people's iman vulnerable. So, the kind of things that liberalism throws at them, secularism throws at them, the whole LGBT types of issues, the acceptance of these things, the kind of aggressive promotion of atheism, and how, because of that, religion is often undermined and sidelined and seen as just superstition and just kind of opium of the masses, and all these types of ideas. Some of our young people are studying these things, right? And how do we know that vulnerability isn't resulting in doubts and so on? The vulnerability is from lack of knowledge, right? But then how do we know that's not resulting in doubts? So I was faced with this issue. So the purpose really for me was simple. I've got teenagers in my family. I want to teach them directly. So I designed a course really for them specifically. And then I thought, okay, how do I make sure that I get through this curriculum and it doesn't become a bit informal because it's all family? So I opened it up to other like-minded parents and for their teenage children, and turned it into a proper formal program. And I've taught a year of that now. So we're actually into our second year. Originally it was meant to be a year. I got through a year of it and decided it's now going to be 2 years. But anyway, that's the purpose of it. The purpose really was so that if ever on the Day of Judgment I was asked, have you gone through the essentials of Deen with your own children, given the knowledge that you have, given given that you're talking to other people about these issues and helping them answer these questions, what about your own children? What about your nephews, your nieces? So I wanted to make sure that I'm in a position to be able to, at least on the Day of Judgment, say to Allah, yes, I fulfill that duty, because save yourselves and your families from the hellfire, right? قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. So really, that's kind of how the LYP, or the Learned Youth Program, was born. That was the purpose of it for me. Obviously, now that I've taught it to them for a year, I've realized it's extremely beneficial. I've taken feedback off of them. It's had a really good impact on the young people that I've taught. So now we will be running it again every year. And this is the only course that I'll be personally teaching, actually. Other courses will be eventually delegated to other teachers and tutors. I'll be continuing to teach this one. The way I launched the Learned Youth Program was I wanted children who were from a kind of similar background to my own children. So, fairly strong religious upbringing, good Islamic education, and so on. So yes, it's true that the vast majority of young people who are likely to come onto the Learned Youth Program would have been people who've actually had a good Islamic education. So our first cohort, there's children there who actually already speak Arabic. Like, that's how strong their Islamic education is. They've studied the Islamic sciences. to some extent, you know, as in they're really well molded, but the parents still sent them onto the Learned Youth Program, and this is where it becomes different to the LYP, is because they want their children to study with me. You know, they know me and they feel they can benefit from Maulana Shams, right? And obviously, I'm not looking to teach them maktab subjects. Okay, so it's different in that I give them mentoring, so they have direct access to me both through the program as well as forever. I like being very accessible to my students in particular. I don't know what people think of their accessibility to me. I may not be as accessible, but my students will testify that I remain very accessible to them out of a sense of duty. So, so I suppose one thing that's different is I'll be teaching it. I believe I do a fairly good job on these issues and have a good grasp of them. Secondly, we cover the foundations of Islam in terms of the proofs. So we cover the proofs of Islam, right? What are the proofs of Islam? What are the proofs of Iman? What are the proofs of Allah? What are the proofs for prophethood? We cover aspects of critical thinking, some aspects of logic, so that children know what is a good argument, you know, for or against, and so on. So these are some unique aspects that won't get covered in madrasa, and then, or in maktab. Then in the LYP in particular, what happens is, along with that aspect, they study Arabic language and the Islamic sciences, right? So they'll study about 50% of the course, maybe 40% of the course is Arabic language, with a focus on Qur'anic Arabic. So the idea is to really develop their Arabic literacy with a focus on the Qur'an and also on, eventually on Hadith and classical Arabic, with the objective of helping them access classical religious literature, just so that that's something that remains open for them. So again, with my children and my kind of teenagers in my family in mind, I want my son to pursue Islamic studies. I want him, inshallah, to become a servant of the deen, to become educated in the deen at a higher level. But at the same time, I want him to kind of choose that for himself. But obviously, he's not going to make a choice of something that he isn't aware of or he hasn't tasted. And so exposing him to Arabic grammar, Arabic language, and then also the Islamic sciences gives him a taste. And I'm hoping that if he doesn't choose it now, then he will choose it in the future, because he's tasted it. And at least there will always be this argument to kind of perhaps keep a parallel effort going as he goes through college and university, to continue to develop in his Islamic sciences. And key in that is, and the Arabic language aspect plays an important role because it gives him access to advanced study. So for example, if their Arabic reaches a point where they can now study text, we could move to a level, we could move to a stage where we go through Islamic text, Arabic Islamic texts, advanced text one by one, which is actually the plan once the LYP is completed. And then in terms of the Islamic sciences, I cover, you know, the fiqh of ibadat in a good amount of detail. And then we'll also cover the seerah, Islamic history, and, you know, and so on. So all of these things really, at the level of detail that is covered in the LYP, isn't done in madrasa. It's all very introductory in madrasa and maktab. Of course, if you don't know what that means, we're talking about the part-time Islamic educational provision in masjids and, you know, in Islamic centers that most of these children and other children would have experienced, or the private tuition that they get. It's not really in depth at all. The idea here is for these children to go through all of these things in depth. So that's the difference. So the Learned Youth Program is for 14 to 18-year-olds mainly. I have made some exceptions for some 13-year-olds who are academically bright, and some sort of university students who've been very, very keen. And we'll continue to make those exceptions on an individual basis, but for the most part, it's designed with the 14 to 18 kind of age group. So if you like, it starts with towards the end of secondary and kind of we will take on students who are kind of first year at university. We'll go as far as that. For the LYP in particular, given that it's quite exclusive, we want young people from good religious families with a strong background in their Islamic studies, in their madrasas and so on. So they've had a good madrasa education. We won't teach them Qur'an and things like that, so we'd expect that to have been taken care of quite well in madrasa. So it's for them, and also they have to be able to commit to the amount of time, given that they'll be doing GCSEs, perhaps A-levels and so on. So they've already got those pressures, and then they have the LYP on top, which is an additional 6 hours worth of study a week. So they've got to be able to cope with that, and therefore we tend to pick students, and it is quite selective. We tend to pick students who are academically quite doing well and bright, because they're the ones that will be able to cope with it. The Learned Youth Program is overall a 2-year course now. So we've finally decided that we're going to run it for a 2nd year. Really because we want to give them the basic Islamic studies in depth in English in the 1st year, cover the foundations of faith and so on, and then the Arabic that we cover over a year, teaching the equivalent of like 1 evening, or like about 2 to 3 hours a week. Doesn't really go very far in one academic year. So we want to get it to a point where it's fairly advanced. So in the 2nd year they'll do some more Arabic and start to study more literature in Arabic, start to understand the Quran directly in Arabic more, start to perhaps even study some subjects like Seerah in Arabic, stories of the prophets in Arabic and things like that, so that they develop greater confidence in being able to access literature. So we need a 2nd year for that. So overall it's a 2-year program. So if you're enrolling, keep in mind that it'll go on for 2 years. So so one of the reasons why we can make the Learned Youth Program a bit more exclusive, and it's quite heavy in terms of content, and a lot of people will want that for young people to be like, I want my child to study. One of the benefits of the LYP is that it actually covers the early parts of our Alamiya course, and it actually opens that world up to young people, right? It's a great option. Like what I've said about what I want for my son, my sons actually, because the younger ones will do it as well, but my nephews and nieces, what I want for them is to remain exposed to the Islamic sciences so that they can pursue it. A lot of parents will feel like that about their children, and the LYP is for them. But for people who think that the LYP is too much, and they don't, every Muslim child doesn't need that much exposure to the Islamic sciences. For them, there is a much more light touch program, 1-year program called the Youth Mentoring Program, which is only a couple of hours a week worth of contact, and then there is some continuous one-to-one mentoring type work, and that's designed really to kind of make sure that through a set of really diverse and rich talking sessions, young people can discuss things that cause turbulence in their minds and cause doubts and so on. They can bring their questions to someone. We can have open conversations and discussions about sensitive matters. And there's about 50% of the contact time, so an hour out of 2 hours a week, will be spent actually studying some material based on some of the courses that we already run here at Mawa'id Lifestyle. So for people who want like a dedicated program that covers a lot of content, it's the LYP. People who can't commit that much, or if their children can't commit that much, then for the same age group we have the Youth Mentoring Program. So the course will start in September. It'll be 1 academic year. It'll be about 34 or so weeks in the year. We're making some adjustments this year we're making some adjustments for September 2021 from this academic year onwards, to try to give students some time off during their exam prep time. So when they have exam leave, we want to give them time off as well, so that they can concentrate on their exams. We're going to reduce it from 40 weeks to about 34 weeks. Yeah, so it starts in September and it'll end in July, but we'll make those adjustments, inshallah. To enroll for the Learned Youth Program, Basically, go to mawaridlifestyle.com. The Learned Youth program is very prominently featured right from the home page, as well as the youth mentoring program. Just go to the page, read the information, and then submit the application form online. You'll see it kind of towards the bottom of the page, and then you don't actually pay any fees or anything at this stage. And then we will, for the Learned Youth program in particular, there is a proper enrollment process. So there'll be we will get in touch with you, book an interview, have some conversation with it. We'll try to meet the child before the course begins, meet the parents, have a good understanding about expectations and so on, and then basically pay fees, and then finally enrollment is confirmed. And they then get, once all of that's done, they get registered onto our website and onto our learning management system, so that they can access the lessons, and as well as access reading material, presentations, etc., and recordings of lessons. All of our lessons are recorded, so that just as an added feature, but that stuff is only accessible. So that's basically how enrollment is going to be.